Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. She crashed her luxury SUV straight into my freshly poured driveway, then demanded my truck as compensation. When I refused, she forged documents, staged protests, and tried to seize my land. Big mistake. She picked a war on the wrong property, and now she's paying for every inch of it. It had rained all night. The kind of Colorado spring storm that doesn't care what your plans are, whether you've got concrete curing or your dog needs to go out. I'd been up since 5, checking the tarp coverage on the new section of driveway I'd poured yesterday. 12 feet of reinforced concrete with rebar, designed to handle the weight of a loaded trailer or even a mini excavator. That stretch was my pride. I didn't subcontract the job, didn't cut corners, didn't rush. Just me, my forms, my level. And a long damn day. By 10 in the morning, the sky had broken into a steady drizzle, and I figured the worst of it had passed. I just sat down in my shop with a cup of black coffee when I heard the sound. Not thunder, not construction. It was something more sickening. A loud crunch, followed by a metallic clatter and what sounded like tires spinning uselessly in something they had no business being in. I froze. No crew was scheduled, no deliveries, and no sane neighbor should be anywhere near the property today. Not with the private drive. No HOA access signs posted on both ends of the side trail. I stepped out of the shop, and I immediately saw it. There, wedged into the soft corner of my freshly poured driveway, sat a white Range Rover. Nose deep in the unset concrete, rear wheels lifted slightly as if the SUV had tried to climb a ramp and failed miserably. It had left 2 deep gouges in the wet mix, cutting clear through the surface and down to the base layer. And the driver, standing outside, arms folded, like she'd parked on her own damn property. I knew that face. Blonde bob, immaculate beige raincoat, and that look. Half smug, half accusatory. Karen Applewood, president of the HOA from the Oakwind Preserve, the neighborhood across the property line. We'd spoken maybe twice, both times unpleasant. She'd once asked me to tone down the industrial aesthetic of my storage shed for the sake of the neighborhood appearance. Never mind the fact I wasn't part of her HOA or that my property had been carved out 20 years before Oakwind was even platted. She didn't even look guilty. "Oh," she said as I approached. "I was wondering when someone would show up." "Someone," I repeated. "This is my land. What the hell are you doing here?" "My Range Rover bottomed out at the Oakwind main gate," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the opposite direction. The gravel softened. I couldn't get through. But I remembered this side path. "You mean the locked and posted side path?" She shrugged. "The lock was rusted. I figured it was abandoned. And I was in a hurry." I walked around the front of the vehicle, inspecting the mess. The concrete was ruined, completely torn up in 2 channels. She'd hit it before it fully cured. Her front axle must have bottomed out hard. There was a visible fluid stain starting to spread from beneath her SUV. I bent down, confirmed it. Transmission fluid, maybe. She'd done damage to more than just my driveway. "You're trespassing," I said flatly. "And you've destroyed over $2,000 of curing concrete," Karen scoffed. "You really should have had a barrier up. Someone could have been hurt. There was a chain. You cut it." "I did no such thing." I turned toward the broken lock lying in the grass. Clean cut. The bolt cutters were still there, wet and dirty. Karen followed my eyes and for the first time looked slightly uneasy. "I thought the road was public access." "It's not. It's been marked. It's on my deed." "You know this." She leaned against the hood of her vehicle, clearly trying to maintain control of the situation, even though her SUV sat tilted like a ship run aground. "Well, what's done is done," she said. "Let's be reasonable. If your concrete wasn't so soft, this wouldn't have happened. Maybe we can talk about insurance." I stared at her. Was she really trying to flip this on me? "You're going to pay for the damage," I said. "Every square inch. And you're going to tow this thing out before it hardens around your wheels." She waved her hand dismissively. "Let's not get dramatic. It's not that bad. And I do think we need to talk about what your insurance will cover. My vehicle is going to need serious repair." I took a step closer. "You're on private property. You broke in. You caused the damage. You're lucky I'm not calling the sheriff right now." She smiled faintly. "Oh, go ahead. I'd love to explain to them how you endangered residents of the community by blocking an emergency access route." That was the moment I realized what she was doing. She wasn't just covering for herself, she was trying to turn the entire HOA into a justification for her trespassing. And this was just the opening move. The tow truck arrived 2 hours later, and it took the poor guy nearly 45 minutes just to figure out how to pull the Range Rover out without causing further damage to the concrete or to his own winch. I stood on the edge of the shop's overhang, arms crossed, watching the circus unfold while Karen paced near the road, umbrella in hand, barking into her phone. Her voice carried, even over the soft mechanical grind of the winch. "I told you, Jerry, the driveway wasn't marked properly. He's liable. You'll file the claim today." She turned away when she saw me watching. I didn't respond. I had other priorities, namely redoing 2 full panels of concrete that had been torn up by her vehicle. All that time, all that money, the perfect finish, it was toast. Ruined by a woman who thought signs and locks didn't apply to her. The truck finally dragged the Range Rover out with a loud thunk as it cleared the edge of the slab. The concrete looked worse up close. Chunks gouged out, rebar twisted at the corner, tire ruts hardened just enough to crack unevenly. I already knew it'd take a jackhammer to clean it up. As the tow operator finished strapping the SUV to his flatbed, Karen sauntered up to me, shaking off the rain like she was arriving at a brunch meeting. "I hope you plan on filing a claim through your contractor's insurance," she said. "I am the contractor," I replied, deadpan. She blinked. "Oh, well, then I suppose it's your business's responsibility. You destroyed my work because you didn't post a hazard notice. I posted no trespassing signs. You cut through a locked chain." She sighed heavily, like I was being dense. It wasn't about trespassing. It was an emergency. I had no other way to get into Oakwind without going all the way around the canyon road, and that was flooded. "You decided your inconvenience was worth breaking into my land and damaging it?" "I decided I had no choice," she snapped suddenly. Louder. "This wouldn't have happened if you'd coordinated better with the HOA. You know this trail used to be part of the old fire road system. There's an expectation of mutual use." "There's also property law," I said, "and a deed, and a busted driveway." She didn't like that. Her jaw tightened and she jabbed a finger toward my truck parked a few feet away. "Well, then maybe you'd prefer we resolve this through formal channels. I've spoken with our attorney. Since your work site wasn't properly marked or flagged, your negligence caused damage to my vehicle. I'll be expecting reimbursement. Or..." Her eyes slid over to the Ford F-250, my main workhorse. "You can hand over the truck in lieu of damages." It's a fair compromise, all things considered. I laughed, not a chuckle, a full, incredulous laugh. "You want my truck for your screw-up." She lifted her chin. "The HOA board is behind me on this." "Oh, I'm sure they are," I said. "And I'm sure they'll be real helpful when I file for criminal trespass, property damage, and unlawful entry." "Now you're just being hostile." "I'm being accurate." She turned on her heel and marched back toward the tow truck, climbing into the passenger seat, like a queen entering her carriage. As they drove off down the main road, I stared after them, my fists clenching automatically. It wasn't just the damage, it was the arrogance, the entitlement, the way she talked like I owed her something for the privilege of her wrecking my property. That night, the email came, attached, a formal demand letter from Oakwind Preserve's legal firm, asserting that I had failed to warn about unsafe construction and that my lack of neighborly communication had directly caused emotional and material harm to Mrs. Applewood. They estimated the Range Rover's damage at $17,000 and suggested that my business's insurance cover it, or else the HOA would seek a suitable asset in kind to settle. They included photos of her car, photos taken on my land, with no mention, of course, of the bolt cutters, the signs, the lock, or the fact she hadn't asked a damn thing before driving into my work zone. I didn't reply to the email. I walked out to the garage, turned on the exterior lights, and grabbed a flash drive. The security system had been recording all day, every frame, from 4 different angles. Karen was about to find out that I don't play nice when someone tries to take my truck. I spent the better part of the next morning going through camera footage, cataloging every second of Karen's little detour like I was building a legal case, which, to be fair, I was. I had 4 cameras covering the side gate and driveway area, 1 on the workshop corner, 1 above the garage, 1 up on the old pine tree, and a discreet trail cam I'd mounted near the secondary path for wildlife, and, more recently, HOA creepers. The footage was gold. At 8:42 a.m., Karen's Range Rover rolled up to the side gate. She got out wearing that same beige trench coat, holding a bright red umbrella, like she was auditioning for a Macy's catalog shoot. She looked around once, then reached into her back seat and pulled out a pair of bolt cutters. Big ones, probably borrowed from her landscaper. At 8:43, she snipped the padlock in one motion, tossed it into the grass, and physically removed the chain from the gateposts. The "No Trespassing, Private Property, Not HOA Access" sign was clearly visible in 3 of the 4 angles. She didn't so much as glance at it. At 8:45, she stepped back into her SUV and drove through the opening, her front wheels lurching immediately into the coned-off concrete section. At 8:46, her undercarriage met my slab like a sledgehammer, and the rest was painful history. By 9:08, she was on the phone, and by 9:15, she was already pacing, clearly planning her story. I copied all 4 angles onto the flash drive and placed it into a padded envelope, along with printed stills. I labeled them with timestamps, circled the bolt cutters, circled the chain, highlighted the sign, and included a short, factual summary of events. No editorializing. Then I called Maya. Maya Hart was my attorney. We'd worked together before when some subcontractor tried to stiff me on steel delivery fees. She was sharp, fast-talking, and legally vicious when she needed to be. By noon, I was in her office with the drive in hand and the HOA letter in my inbox. She scanned through it with a scoff and raised an eyebrow at the part about the truck offer. "She wants your Ford," she said, glancing up. Apparently that's her idea of a settlement. Was there a head injury involved in her incident? Just an ego fracture. She plugged in the flash drive and played through the footage silently. After 5 minutes, she sat back and cracked her knuckles. "Well, this is open and shut trespass, destruction of property, and misuse of public legal process if she keeps pushing her demand letter. And you're not just dealing with a crazy neighbor here. This is the HOA's official legal counsel acting on her behalf." She said they were backing her. Maya narrowed her eyes. "We'll find out just how much they really knew." She started outlining our response. A formal letter demanding that all claims be withdrawn immediately, coupled with a cease and desist for harassment and trespass. She was also preparing a counterclaim for property damage, unlawful entry, malicious misrepresentation, and business interference. I told her about the earlier times Karen had driven near the gate without permission, and Maya suggested we pull past security logs too. Pattern of behavior always plays well in court. By the time I left her office, I had copies of everything saved in both physical and digital form. I even dropped one set at the sheriff's substation that afternoon, just to have it on file. The deputy at the desk recognized Karen's name before I finished explaining. "She's not even your HOA?" he asked. "Nope." "Then this might get spicy." I was counting on it. That night, I got another email. This time, not from the HOA lawyer, but from Steve Ryland, a guy I knew vaguely from around the Oakwind community. He was a concrete contractor too, worked mostly driveways and patios inside the HOA boundaries. The subject line read, "You might want to see this." Inside was a screenshot of a neighborhood forum post from Oakwind's internal portal. Karen had posted it herself, complete with a photo of her Range Rover being towed off my property. Her caption, "This is what happens when reckless individuals try to block emergency access routes. HOA will respond accordingly. Stay tuned." The comments were a mixed bag. Some residents lapped it up. Others were already asking questions like, "Is that the guy outside the HOA line?" And "Didn't we vote against accessing that fire road last year?" But the damage was done. She was trying to turn her accident into some kind of moral crusade and pin it all on me. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the gate, now rechained with a new reinforced lock and steel posts on either side. I was done waiting. I was done reacting. If she wanted a war over access, damage, and imaginary community rules, then she'd picked the wrong guy to trespass on. By midweek, things took a turn from legal to theatrical. I was pouring a replacement form for the damaged section when I noticed a cluster of cars lining the opposite side of the street. Not unusual. My road butts up against the Oakwind Preserve's outer loop, and folks occasionally park there to walk dogs or sneak down to the nearby trailhead. But this wasn't that. There were folding chairs being unpacked, a large portable speaker system, a guy in a polo shirt adjusting a clipboard in wires, a table with pamphlets, and then the centerpiece. Karen Applewood herself, dressed like she was about to give a TED Talk on dictatorship, adjusting her lapel mic and pacing in front of a HOA printed banner that read, "Safety, Access, Community, Stop the Blockade." I stepped. out from the garage in disbelief, concrete still wet on my gloves, and watched as a small crowd gathered, maybe 30 people, mostly older residents from Oakwind. Some were filming, others were holding little signs clearly printed last minute, reading things like "Private greed hurts public safety" and "No more land grabs." Karen stepped up to the mic and tapped it for attention. "Good afternoon, Oakwind neighbors and concerned citizens. Today, I'm here to address a dangerous situation that affects every one of us." I took a deep breath. This was happening. She launched into a 10-minute monologue that twisted the truth so hard it practically folded in on itself. According to her, I had intentionally blocked a historic emergency access route with unlawful concrete expansion, endangering residents, first responders, and the spirit of community cooperation. She mentioned her Range Rover accident as if she'd been a victim of sabotage. "Now, some may say, but isn't that private land?" she said theatrically. Well, I say, what is public interest if not the lifeblood of our shared environment? When driveways are used to divide us instead of unite us, we lose something bigger than concrete. The crowd clapped. Someone actually whistled. I was half tempted to roll out a speaker of my own and hit play on the security footage. Instead, I grabbed my phone and began filming the whole circus. I panned slowly across the crowd, catching faces, signs, Karen's speech, and the loud cheers at each exaggeration. That wasn't all. The next morning, my work truck was blocked in. Someone had parked an SUV nose to nose with my Ford on the edge of the public road, but angled just enough onto my private shoulder to prevent me from exiting. A HOA issued warning note was tucked under my wiper blade. "Unauthorized vehicle parked in disputed access zone may be subject to removal." Disputed access zone. They were treating my own driveway like some kind of demilitarized buffer. I called the sheriff. Again. Deputy Langley showed up. He was the same one who'd taken the initial report last week. When he saw the SUV, the note, and the photo I showed him from the HOA protest, he just shook his head. "This is starting to look less like a civil complaint and more like targeted harassment," he muttered. I asked him if it was illegal. "If they set foot past your property line again or interfere with access to your vehicle, it is," he said. "This note? Borderline. But you document everything. Every time. If this escalates any further, we'll have enough for criminal interference." He handed me a business card with a case number and his direct contact, told me to call anytime. That afternoon, I installed 2 more cameras, one facing the edge of the road where the crowd had gathered, and one on a pole angled toward the side approach Karen kept referencing as public easement. Let her try again. This time, the whole damn internet could see it. But Karen wasn't done yet. That evening, she posted a new message in the Oakwind Digital Forum, screenshotted again by a resident and forwarded to me. It read, "Oakwind HOA will be filing an emergency petition with the county to clarify legal access to the Southeast Trail route. We urge all neighbors to voice their support in protecting public accessibility." She wasn't just trying to pressure me with words now. She was going to try to take my road on paper. The next morning, I was up early reviewing footage from the new pole-mounted camera when a text buzzed through from Maya. "Call me. You're going to love this." When I got her on the line, she didn't waste time. She filed it. Emergency access petition. She's claiming your driveway's side path is a critical ingress point for HOA utility and safety services, and that it's been used by mutual understanding for years. I nearly dropped my coffee. That's a lie on every level. "Oh, I know," Maya said, dry as a desert fence post. She even attached a grainy printout from Google Maps as evidence, with an arrow pointing across your property, like that proves anything. Does it mention that the HOA was established after this land was deeded separately? She left that part out, along with the part where she cut a lock and sunk her Land Rover in wet cement. I stared out at the slab, now fully torn up and reframed. What happens next? The county has to schedule a preliminary hearing before even considering any physical site inspections, but the more noise she makes publicly, the more she manipulates people into thinking she's the victim. We need to push back, loudly and legally. "I've got video," I reminded her, "and eyewitnesses." "That's a start, but I'm filing a motion today, injunction against further HOA interference, any attempt to access, surveil, or claim part of your land. And I want to loop in code enforcement, because if she's making false land use claims, that's filing a fraudulent application." I hung up, pacing in front of the shop. The nerve of this woman. It wasn't enough that she'd destroyed my driveway. Now she was trying to rewrite geography. And she was getting bolder. Just after lunch, the cops came again, but this time, not for her. 2 squad cars, lights flashing. A young officer walked to the front porch while the other stayed by the cruiser. I stepped outside calmly, wiping my hands. "Sir, we received a report of stolen property located at this address," the officer said. I blinked. "What property?" "A white Ford pickup, allegedly removed from HOA jurisdiction without board permission. Caller says it's registered in a shared ingress corridor. We're obligated to investigate." I nearly laughed. "You mean my truck? On my driveway? Can I see proof of ownership?" I opened the garage, pulled out the folder with the title, registration, and insurance. All in my name, all tied to this address. Then I walked him over to the boundary line where my property starts and the HOA perimeter ends, marked with concrete markers from a county survey done 5 years back. "See this?" I said. "That post is the HOA border. Everything west of here is me. Always has been." The officer nodded, clearly embarrassed. "Sorry, sir. We'll file this as unfounded. Mind if we log your footage for our report?" I pulled out the flash drive from this morning's clip, Karen pacing the sidewalk across the line with binoculars and a phone. By the time they left, I was boiling. She'd actually tried to report my vehicle. That wasn't just harassment. That was misuse of law enforcement resources. I called Maya again. "You want escalation? We've got it." She was already typing. Adding 2 new charges to our counterclaim, filing a false report, and abuse of process. I was ready to take it further. That night, I added floodlights over the driveway entrance and installed a metal barricade pole at the secondary gate. Manual, but with a coded padlock. Then I mounted a new sign directly onto the gate frame. "Private property, not HOA access. Trespassers will be prosecuted." Next to it, I hung a laminated printout, a still frame of Karen with the bolt cutters in her hand, caught mid-clip. She wanted a show. Fine. Let her look up every morning and see exactly how this was going to go. Friday started out suspiciously quiet. No patrols, no false alarms, no HOA members pretending to be just passing by. For a moment, I let myself believe Karen had finally gotten the message. That illusion ended when I checked my mailbox around noon. There was no postage, just a plain white envelope shoved into the box. Inside was a photocopy of a petition submitted to the county planning office. Karen was requesting an official reclassification of the side portion of my driveway as an auxiliary public access route for emergency and utility vehicles servicing Oakwind Preserve. The attachment, a fake site plan with a dotted line cutting straight through my land. Even worse, at the bottom was a signature, supposedly mine. I scanned the entire packet, shot photos from all angles, and sent them to Maya. Her call came less than 10 minutes later. "This is felony territory now," she said flatly. "Forged signature, falsified public application, attempted land usurpation. She's crossed every possible line." Do you think she did it herself? Maybe. Or someone on her board, but it doesn't matter. This is evidence. I'm filing a motion to freeze all action on her petition and requesting a forensic review of the signature. I rubbed my temple and stared out at the edge of my property. You think the county bought any of it? They haven't approved anything yet, but if she makes noise fast enough, people might assume it's already legal. We have to stay ahead of her. I didn't expect what came next. That evening, I got a call from Jerry, an older gentleman who lived in Oakwind, someone I'd done fence work for a while back. "Hey Braden, I just left the HOA meeting. You're not going to like this. Karen told everyone you already agreed to shared access, that you signed off, and that beginning Monday, she'll be authorizing clearance work on the side path behind your garage." She's lying. Again. She showed the group some permit, claimed it was approved, and said your truck was blocking what's now technically a community access lane. I thanked him, hung up, and didn't hesitate. I had a row of leftover concrete barricades from an old project, each one about 3 feet tall and weighing nearly 1,000 pounds. Early the next morning, I placed them in a line along the side path, exactly where the property line stood according to my official plat. I spray painted each one, private, no access. Then I laminated copies of my county deed map and mounted them on signposts beside the barricades. At 9 a.m., sharp on Monday, I was waiting. Sure enough, a white SUV with the HOA logo pulled up along the edge of the road. Karen stepped out, Clipboard in hand, flanked by 3 guys in safety vests and construction gear. One of them started unloading traffic cones. Another pulled out a shovel. Karen approached, flashing her paper like it was a court order. "We're initiating preliminary clearance," she announced. "This route has been reclassified." "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "You have no legal authority to be here." She held up a copy of the same forged map, though this time without the fake signature. "This is the latest plat map, submitted and unchallenged." Unchallenged? I held up a sealed envelope. "Here's the court-issued injunction. This morning's timestamp. No further action is permitted until a judge reviews the case." The crew stopped moving. One of the workers glanced at the others, then at Karen. "You didn't say this was contested." "It's not," she snapped. "It's being clarified." "Ma'am," the guy closest to her said, "we're not touching this job." He turned to his buddies. "Pack it up." Karen stared at me, furious, as they backed away and drove off. I walked over and taped the court order to the barricade. Right next to it, I placed a laminated printout of her original forged map with a red X drawn through it and a bold heading. "Fraudulent claim. Under legal review." She said nothing, just stood there with her clipboard, jaw tight, before finally getting back into her SUV. I figured Karen would lay low for a few days after getting shut down in front of her own hired crew. I underestimated how deep her obsession ran. On Wednesday morning, I woke to the sound of tires crunching gravel outside my window. I pulled back the blinds, and my blood pressure spiked. A black tow truck had reversed halfway into my driveway, backed up just far enough to hook its winch under my work truck's front axle, and standing beside it, gesturing like she was conducting an orchestra, was Karen Applewood. I bolted outside in my boots and a t-shirt, phone already recording. "Back away from the truck," I yelled. The tow operator looked startled. Karen turned to me with that smug, entitled smile I'd come to hate. "Oh good, you're up. This'll go faster." "You're trespassing," I said. "You called this tow?" "I sure did," she snapped. "That vehicle is obstructing a community access route, and since you've refused to move it voluntarily, it's on my property." She stepped forward, holding a crumpled document in her hand. "This map proves otherwise." "It's fake," I growled. "And you know it." By then, I was standing between her and the tow truck. The operator scratched his head and stepped back. "Ma'am, I'm not touching anything if there's a dispute." Karen threw a fit on the spot, arms flailing, screaming that I was threatening public safety, hoarding county access, and creating a liability for the HOA. I pointed to the concrete. "Barricades 10 feet away." "You think those mean nothing," I said. "There's a court order taped to that post. Do you want me to call the sheriff again?" He must have heard me. Deputy Nunez pulled up just 5 minutes later. Karen tried intercepting him first, rambling a pre-rehearsed story about neighborhood access and non-compliance. He didn't even blink. He came straight to me. "She forged a plat map," I explained calmly. "Submitted it to the county. I've got the originals, injunction, everything. And now she's trying to tow my truck." Nunez sighed and turned to the operator. "Unhook it, now. And you," he gestured at Karen, "if you make one more false claim of public right-of-way on private land, I'll arrest you myself." That got quiet real fast. Karen stormed off without another word, and the tow truck reversed out of my driveway empty. I thought it was over for the day, but Oakwind's tactics had just shifted gears. That afternoon, I caught a drone buzzing over my backyard, low, slow, and obvious. I retrieved mine from the garage, launched it fast, and chased the intruder all the way to the edge of Oakwind's perimeter, where it dipped into a yard 3 lots deep. Guess whose it was? I sent the footage to Maya. She called me 2 hours later. "They're trying to prove you've been blocking a registered emergency lane, but it doesn't exist." And now they're collecting visual documentation to try and challenge the court order. Karen's behind it. Almost certainly, but we've got enough to escalate this. I glanced at my Ford, still parked safely behind the barricades. Escalate how? I'm filing for an emergency restraining order against her personally and the HOA as an entity. No more drones, no more personnel, no more contact. If they breathe on your property again, they're done. The restraining order hearing was set for Monday morning. Maya had already submitted the motion, complete with drone footage, witness statements, and a full copy of the forged site application. She assured me the judge wouldn't take kindly to an HOA president weaponizing county documents and private contractors, but Karen wasn't about to wait for court. No, she went for spectacle instead. Sunday morning, I opened my front door and nearly choked on the sound. A full-blown HOA community rally was unfolding, right on the easement by my fence. Folding tables, cheap sound system, a cluster of folding chairs, and a banner strung between two poles. Oakwind deserves access. Stop the blockade. She'd turned it into theater. Karen stood at the center, microphone in hand, waving copies of the forged plat map like they were sacred scrolls. "We must stand against obstructionists who deny our shared community values," she shouted. "This is not about one man's paranoia. It's about preserving the integrity and unity of Oakwind Preserve." I stepped forward from my porch, calm but cold. "You are trespassing on my land. That banner post is 5 feet into my boundary line. You've got 60 seconds to take it down before I call the sheriff." Again. She ignored me. Then she made her final mistake. Karen turned to the crowd and raised a sheet of paper. "Here is proof that Mr. Holt gave implied consent for access, dated 3 years ago." She waved it like a torch, eyes locked on mine. I froze. I recognized the top of the document. It was a generic equipment drop-off form I'd used once when subcontracting for a resident down the street. A document that had nothing to do with land use or access, but my name and signature were on it. I reached into my pocket and hit record. That form, I said aloud, loud enough for others to hear, was for a driveway repair job in 2021. I have the original. It has nothing to do with Oakwind or easement rights. You're using a business work order as forged consent for access. A few heads in the crowd turned. "I'm asking you all to look closely," I added. "Do you really want your HOA represented by someone who falsifies documents and stages fake protests?" Before she could respond, 2 sheriff's units pulled up. Deputy Nunez stepped out again, this time with another deputy and a clipboard. He didn't wait for her explanation. "We've reviewed the court documents," he said loudly. "This gathering violates the emergency injunction. Everyone not living on this property must disperse immediately. Anyone who refuses will be cited." Karen tried protesting. "It's a peaceful assembly," but the other deputy cut her off. "On private land, under court protection." It was over in 15 minutes. The banner came down. The tables were folded. The last of the HOA diehards shuffled back to their cul-de-sac like kids after a canceled parade. But the real win came the next morning. At the courthouse, the judge granted our full motion, a no-contact order barring Karen and any Oakwind HOA board member from entering or surveying my property, physically or electronically. The forged document was entered into record. The judge ordered a preliminary fraud investigation. Karen's face was stone when she left the courtroom. By Tuesday, Oakwind Preserve looked like it had been hit by a PR hurricane. Karen's face was no longer just the HOA president. It was the headline. Local news picked up the story after the court filings became public record. One of the reporters, a guy from KOAA News 5, called me for comment. I didn't say much, just pointed him to the injunction and the fraud investigation docket, but apparently that was enough. By Wednesday evening, they ran a short segment titled, "HOA President Accused of Forgery and Trespassing in Property Dispute." And that was when the dam really broke. My phone started blowing up with messages from subcontractors, old clients, even 2 Oakwind residents I barely knew. The 2 from Oakwind asked if they could stop by. I agreed, cautiously. Turns out they weren't fans of Karen either. The first Greg was a landscape designer who'd lived in Oakwind for 8 years. The second, Valerie, taught at the community college. Both had experienced Karen's leadership firsthand. "She fined me $600 for a planter I never installed," Valerie said. "She once told me to remove a tree I'd planted because it looked unbalanced," Greg added. That same week, she hired her cousin's company to redesign the common area. Then Greg dropped the bomb. "You're not the only one she targeted with fake documents." I checked some of her filings for common area contracts. There's overlap in notary stamps that don't match timelines. If someone dug deeper, I nodded slowly. "Would you be willing to put that in writing?" Greg didn't hesitate. Already did. I sent it to the county clerk this morning. That gave Maya the opening she needed. She filed a motion to expand the fraud case and subpoenaed all HOA contract records from the last 5 years. The court approved it in under 48 hours. By Thursday, we learned something that took everything to a whole new level. Karen hadn't just tried to remap my driveway. She had already done it in 2 other parts of the subdivision. In one case, she had rerouted a rear service easement to block off a neighbor's side gate, then approved herself a variance to extend her own back patio by 4 feet. It was pure HOA royalty behavior, except now it was on record. On Friday morning, county auditors visited Oakwind Preserve with warrant-backed investigators. By noon, Karen's Range Rover was gone from her driveway, and a legal notice was taped to her front door. Her neighbors watched from behind their blinds. Saturday, I stepped outside to pick up my paper and saw what might be the most satisfying thing I'd witnessed all month. A county crew had removed the old Oakwind entry sign and left behind a temporary marker, HOA under administrative review, pending restructuring. I smiled, grabbed my paper, and walked back inside. The final hearing was held on a rainy Monday morning. I showed up in boots and a clean shirt, Maya in her usual no-nonsense blazer, documents in hand, and that lethal calm on her face. Karen arrived late, her hair pulled into a tight bun, flanked by a visibly nervous man in a suit who turned out to be her new attorney. Her original counsel had dropped her the week before. The courtroom wasn't full, but I noticed at least 4 Oakwind residents in the gallery. One of them was Greg. Another was a guy who'd once argued with me over a fence line, and even he nodded when I walked in. The judge didn't waste time. She opened with the most serious issue: forgery of county documents with intent to alter access routes to private property. Karen tried to speak, but her lawyer stopped her. The judge moved through the evidence quickly: fake maps, altered site plans, statements from county employees, notarization anomalies. Then came the kicker. The court finds clear evidence of premeditated document falsification by Ms. Applewood, under the color of her position as HOA president, with intent to deceive both the county and private citizens. This constitutes fraud, abuse of administrative authority, and trespass with civil malice. Karen's mouth fell open. She blinked like she hadn't fully understood what she was being accused of. Then came sentencing. For the charges proven, the court imposes a civil judgment in the amount of $94,320 to be paid to Mr. Holt for property damage, defamation, and legal costs. Furthermore, the court refers Ms. Applewood to the district attorney for criminal prosecution on counts of forgery and willful fraud. Gasps broke out behind us. Her lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. And just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, Karen tried to slip away quietly, but a local news van was already waiting. I watched from the side as a reporter gently asked, "Ms. Applewood, do you have a comment on the charges of fraud and trespassing?" She didn't answer. She just got into a now beaten-up sedan and drove away. A week later, Oakwind's board was formally dissolved. A court-appointed mediator began reviewing all past HOA actions and contracts. Residents were given the chance to vote on whether to reform the HOA or disband it entirely. They voted disband. The cherry on top? The Range Rover Karen had destroyed trying to drive over my newly poured concrete. It was seized when she failed to make the first installment of court-ordered restitution, so I put up a little display next to my driveway. A handmade wooden sign that read, "Private property, no trespassing, violators prosecuted." And right beside it, Karen's busted Range Rover, auctioned off and now proudly mine, mounted on cinder blocks with a new plate, "For HOA use only."